Hello, I'm Lois Letchford, author of the book Reverse to Memoir and a literacy problem solver and co-founder of Teaching Students with Dyslexia. I'm here to share stories behind the book Reverse to Memoir, and I'm going to talk about each part. Today is part one, and part one begins in Brisbane, Australia in 1994 and ends in 1995, June 1995. It's quite a long section. It's 75 pages throughout this whole part, and it covers quite a range of things that I saw during this period of time. The first couple of chapters are of Nicholas's failure in first grade. Total disastrous failure. Starts on day one of school. I pick him up after school, and then when the teacher talks to me the following week. It's really quite interesting to look and reflect on those chapters now, because although they happened a long time ago, they still impact my son today. And I get upset about a number of things that happened then as the story comes out. Although, those few chapters were disastrous, the first few chapters were disastrous, and then we get the test results, which was even worse. But at least when I was writing, I'm writing it with hindsight, and I could put it into perspective and into what's happened since then. So how do these results impact me now, as much as sitting there and receiving the results way back in December 1995. And then we have a really nice chapter 7, about swimming. Because in Brisbane, Australia, every child learns to swim. And this came about because of the number of deaths in pools. And the government mandated that the schools should have pools and that children should learn to swim in schools. Well, even going to school and sending a child to school who's not been in a pool before can be quite scary, because that's how I learnt to swim. And it's not fun, so I decided to help Nicholas before he goes to school, so at least he has some confidence in water and not terrified of going in the pool. And the first series of learning swimming were not very successful, and then I took him to the next suburb of Indooroopilly in Brisbane, and we came across this coach called Rob Cusack. And Cusack was a name that was somewhat familiar to me. I thought I'd heard it before. But it takes me a while to work out who he is. And he doesn't talk to parents very often. He's busy teaching and coaching his kids. But even when Nicholas went there, he struggled. The teachers struggled to deal with Nicholas, and the moment he didn't follow a direction, they would put him on the side of the pool. And my poor little Nicholas, my poor little boy, his old eyes would roll over and pretend, what can you do? What can you do? And Cusack, the head coach, saw him sitting on the side of the pool, and he just took Nicholas's hand and he said, "You come with me." And it was Cusack who made the difference. Cusack who was the one who took Nicholas and realised this kid needs something else to teach him to swim. And so Nicholas joined his group, and he's doing well with Cusack. And it comes to learning to breathe. And, learning to breathe in swimming is quite a challenging task. And he can't do it. And Cusack pops him on the side of the pool, and he comes over to me, calls me over, and he says, "What hand does he write with?" Well, there's the first problem. He doesn't even know which hand he writes with. And he's been writing with his left hand, only it's now been suggested that that's not working. Change it to his right because it makes it easier. So he's going to write with his right hand next year in school. And so Cusack hopped out of the pool, got a marker, a waterproof marker, and he put a dot between his thumb and his forefinger, just like this. A dot. Put a dot right between his thumb and forefinger, and he said, "Now, Nicholas," he said, "every time you want to take a breath, you watch your hand. You watch your hand go under the water. And every time you have to take a breath, you just watch that dot on your hand. And when the arm goes out, you turn to look at it." He changed the directions and changed the outcomes. That's what happened. And Nicholas did it. He learned to swim, and one of the last days of swimming, at the end of the summer, Cusack says to Nicholas, "Hop in the pool and swim the length of the pool. I think you can swim the length of the pool." And Nicholas says, "I'll do it, Mr. Cusack, as long as you stand in the middle and help me if I need it." And he said, "I can do that, Nicholas." And change over time in the pool. It's noisy. There are a lot of kids there, a lot of parents all watching, and parents had watched Nicholas struggle with this task of learning to swim and the coordination. And so he dives in the pool, and as he swims down the pool, there's absolute silence from everyone at the end on the bleachers. And he swims down, he kicks, he breathes, he passes Mr. Cusack in the pool, does a few more strokes and gets to end. And when he gets to the end, everyone cheers and claps for him. It was a major achievement, and a really positive major achievement for Nicholas. So that was really great fun. And then after our swimming lesson, a lot of other things happened. My husband is a professor, and he is offered study leave back in Oxford, England. So in June, July 1995, we're going to head to Oxford. So there's a chapter on the planning for the study leave and what we're going to do. And then he moves into second grade because we're going to go to Oxford during this year. And the idea was that we can teach Nicholas. Nicholas can go into second grade, and he's going to have the same teacher for 2 years in a row. The first grade teacher was disastrous, and the second grade teacher, I spoke to her and said, there's been such a problem last year. And she said, "I'll help him. I'll make sure that he enjoys this year in school." And she actually did. In fact, she said to me, he's got his spelling words to do. "Will you help him?" I said, "Of course." And it's something I'll never forget, because Nicholas then brought his spelling words to me, and he just said, "Mummy, will you help me with my spelling words?" I said, "Of course, Nicholas, of course I'll help you." And they were 9 rhyming words of cat, hat, rat, bat, sat, mat, pat, and one odd one, yes. And I said, "Nicholas, get a pen and paper, pencil and paper, and we'll sit down and write them out." And my little boy, he's changing hands. He picked up his pencil. He put the pencil over his paper, head down, and he just stopped. And I can still remember standing in the kitchen, watching him, sitting at the table, and nothing moved. And it's then I realised, he can't even formulate a letter, let alone write a word. And something in my brain just clicked. The powerlessness of that little boy, trying so hard. I could see, he was trying, that every ounce of his body was involved in doing something with the word cat, and he didn't know what to do. And I just said, "Put it away, Nicholas, and we'll get some clay." We had some clay, and we'll go outside and we'll do that. For the next hour and a half, Nicholas is 6 years old. For the next hour and a half, we rolled clay. We rolled big snakes of clay, and then we formulated the letters. And we talked about the words, and we did the cat, and the at, and the bat. Every day. Monday night, Tuesday night and Wednesday night. And then Thursday night we used block letters. Friday morning he gave it to me orally. I still have that book that he wrote the test in that day, and he still struggled with it. He really couldn't do that work effectively at the end of the first week. The next week we did the same thing. We got out the clay and we played with these sounds. The next week he got everything right. And that was our first time of saying, I can do it. And it was brilliant. The effort that Nicholas put in was beyond human. It was astronomical that he was able to do that. But you also realise how far he was behind. Anyway, we did it. So that was the clay chapter. And it was fantastic. And that's where I learned that he could see patterns. And he was very good at seeing the pattern, and the teacher gave the spelling list in a pattern, and that made it easy for him to learn. Well, he couldn't do any more than see the pattern of cat, hat, bat, rat at that time. And then one final chapter. Well, there's a couple final chapters. There was a bonus at the end of year 1, which was quite amazing for me, in that Nicholas's class did a play. They were doing The Enormous Turnip as a play. All of the classes, I think there were 4 grade 1 classes, and all of these classes came together to put on a play for the parents at the end of term. And they practiced and practiced and practiced. And they had one student for, the main characters. And the remainder of the class just said the chorus bits of, and it grew and it grew and it grew. And here's something about inclusion and teaching in a classroom. Because here's this Nicholas in grade 1 who can't do anything. I've flipped around a bit. I talked about grade 2, now I'm back in grade 1. He can't do anything. I picked him up from school one day and he was desperate to talk to me. Desperate. Can we wait till we get home? Yes, Nicholas. And when we get home, I say, boys, go inside. I'm going to listen to Nicholas. And I listened to Nicholas. Nicholas told me that story of the enormous turnip from beginning to the end. It took forever, but he told me every single line of that play. And that was an important thing for me to see too, because it tells me he has a memory. He can do things. And that's a critical component. There was a memory, he can access it. And why did he have that memory? Because they were acting it out. It's not a pen and paper piece of work. It was acting, it was doing. And with that action, there was the memory. And that was a critical component for me to see. Nicholas also had speech therapy. Speech therapy was an important part. And the last part of the book was me preparing to go to Oxford. And I go and meet a lady. It's recommended by a cousin. I meet a lady to help me go with some books called Success for All. That was interesting. But at least I had thought I will have something for Nicholas when we go to the UK. So it's over an 18-month period. Now, I have gilded and glided over the whole failure of first grade. I cannot tell you how difficult that year was for my son and for me. My son wet his pants, he bit his fingernails and stared into space every day. What I didn't know was that the teacher shouted at him. That he was sat isolated in the lunch every single day. He had no friends. And since then I have learned that physical isolation in the school is as bad as physical punishment. And it was really a traumatic year that I had hoped and I wished I had removed him from school earlier on. And parents make difficult choices because having a younger child at home makes it then very difficult for Nick to deal with Nicholas, because Nicholas needed one-on-one and quiet. And if a child was there talking to him, he would not have interacted. He would have just phased out. I know that, and that was a significant problem. So we all face challenges. It's what I live with. I didn't even contemplate taking him out of school, and the struggle for me is that no one in the school said there's a real problem going on here. It was acceptable that he was so isolated, and that I have a problem with. No child should feel that isolated in the school setting where kids are meant to be having fun and learning. My son did not have fun. And he remembers it. It's in his brain, embedded in his brain as being traumatic. That's him talking now as an adult. So if your children are struggling, do something about it. Teachers, if you're listening and you see a child that is struggling in school, let's think of some alternatives, because they can learn. So, and really that's the story of my book, is that children can learn, and that we as schools, as a society, must make every effort to teach every child to read. So thank you. It's reversed. You can pick it up on Amazon. The book trailer is on my YouTube channel. Hit like, hit subscribe, share, because sharing helps the story get out, and the story that we must teach children to read, and we can teach them to read, must get out to a much wider audience. So thank you, and I'll talk to you again soon.